And when we talk about 9/11, and of course we will be talking about 9/11 as the 20th anniversary approaches just a couple of weeks from now, um, everybody, Ryan, has their memories of 9/11 if you were of a certain age at the time. You remember where you were when you heard about it, what you were doing, and so on. As for a previous generation was the case with the Kennedy assassination and news of that. There's only one American whose memory of 9/11 is, I had to run the federal government at the time because the president was hopscotching around the country in Air Force One, coming back from Florida. And that person is Dick Cheney. And he did it from a bunker beneath the White House called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, or PEOC, which was a World War II construction, terribly outdated for the communications needs of 2001. But it was it was Mr. Cheney who was essentially guiding the federal response in the early chaotic hours when the towers came down, the Pentagon was struck, and the plane went down in Pennsylvania. From working with the transportation secretary to ground all the flights above the skies, above the American homeland, working with the Defense Department on orders about whether to shoot down if there was another plane incoming for the White House or the Capitol building, as was believed at the time, and so on. And Cheney told me in those interviews, if you look at the photographs that were eventually released years later by the National Archives of that bunker at that time, you can see the National Security Advisor, Condoleezza Rice. You can see the president's longtime confidant from Texas, Karen Hughes. These were people who knew George W. Bush a lot better than Dick Cheney did at that point, really. But if you look at the body language and the composition of those photographs, you'll see that Vice President Cheney is the center of gravity in that room. He is, to use a patriarchal, outdated term, the big daddy in that room, and everyone you can see recognizes it in their own body language. He was calling the shots. And he told me in our interviews that in those moments, what came flooding back to him was a course that he had taken when he was a congressman from Wyoming, the same seat his daughter now occupies, back in the 1980s. Way back in the days, for example, when Dick Cheney was a leadership figure in the Republican House, and when he was, in fact, the top Republican on the Iran-Contra Committee, he took a course in what's called continuity of government, which is, and he and other members of Congress and others were brought out to a remote environment and given lessons on how you keep the United States federal government functioning in the event, as was pondered in those days, of a nuclear attack from the Soviet Union. And that's how he approached his urgent, singular business on the day of 9/11.